Hi, this is Ralph, and I'm going to continue on from the last video and mess around with some more visual elements for the web page. In this particular video, I'd like to focus more on how we can use borders for div elements. Currently, I've got this web page. I've got one container div, and that div has this red dripping paint background image. So if I look over at my web page, that's my style file right there. I've got a reset rule. All elements have margin and padding of 0 pixels. And then I'm manipulating my container element, which is div ID container. It's got width. It's got a thin black border, which is really just there so you could see things. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that border. Margin left and margin right of auto. Has a background image. That background image is not repeating. And I've also set a height of 1,000 pixels just so we could see how that looked. There's my web page. The only thing in my div ID container is my headline 1 red paint. And the only thing I've deleted was that border, and there's my web page now without the border. Okay, the next thing I want to do is I want to manipulate, let's say, the border of this headline up here. So let me jump back over to my HTML. And there's really nothing much I want to change on here. I see that I have a headline 1 red paint. And the goal is whenever you want to change the formatting of your page, you want to try not to do that at all in the HTML. Take care of all of that with the style sheet. So on my style sheet, let's move this up a bit here. And I'm going to go ahead and control my H1. So H1 is going to be my selector. This is a type selector. Before I used a wildcard selector. I use an asterisk as a selector. It represents all other selectors. Then I used an ID selector. Whenever you're referring to an ID attribute, it's a pound sign. And this is a type selector, or sometimes called a tag selector. Basically, if there's a particular HTML element you want to manipulate, like all headline 1s, or all headline 2s, or all paragraphs, then it's just a type selector, and the selector looks just like the tag that you want to mess with. In this one, I'm going to do font weight normal. And I'm going to get rid of the default bolding. And let's see, I will also do text align center. That'll get my headline centered on the page. Now notice the way I center text is different than the way I centered my div container. If you recall, I centered my div container horizontally on the page by giving it auto left margin and auto right margin. When you want to center text within a block container, then you do text align center. And let me go ahead and do a font family, and I'm going to choose good old Verdana. Alright, so I've made a few noticeable elements to my page, or I'm sorry, to my headline 1, and one really noticeable one. How about color pound sign, and I'm going to do FF. And I want to talk a little bit about hex codes, which is what this is, hexadecimal color codes. So let me go ahead and save this for a moment. I'm going to pop open a new blank page here, and let me type up something really quick. There we go. So what I've got here is I've got a scale from 0 through 9, A through F. And these are all of the characters, numbers and the alphanumeric characters, that make up what is called hexadecimal code. Hexadecimal code is a color representation, and hexadecimal code is made up of 6 characters. The first 2 represent red, the second 2 represent green, and the last 2 represent blue. Red, green, and blue. Sometimes you might hear these referred to as RGB codes. Now the scale goes from dark to bright. Notice it's not dark to light. So dark is over on the 0, 1, 2 side of the scale. Bright is over on the C, D, E, F end of the scale. This means if I had a hex code, let's say of FF 0000, that means I have no green, no blue, and only red. Well, where is the red on the scale? It's over on the bright end of the scale. This is the hex code FF0000 for bright red. If I had all zeros, no red, no green, no blue, everything's over on the dark end of the scale, this is the hex code for black. And if you combine all colors, FF, then you've got bright. Now they don't have to match up. For instance, I don't have to have FF. I could have F5 and 2C and D1, but I don't have those colors memorized, so I don't want to tell you about them yet. So red, green, and blue. What about this one? What if I have 64 00 64. Okay, so I don't have any green, but I have red and blue. I have equal portions of red and blue, which makes purple. So the question for you is this a dark purple or a bright purple? Well, it's probably somewhere in the middle. Okay, so it's in the middle of the scale. So this is probably a medium to medium dark purple. Equal portions of red, green, and blue. So that's where hex codes come from. Now, when you want to use hex codes in a page, it's really easy. You generally do this in your style sheet. You can control colors and background colors and border colors, a whole bunch of uses. And you can find hex codes all over the web. If I just jump out to the web real quick and do a Google search for hex codes, there we go. There's a whole bunch of them here. And let me just click on this. Oh, this one is pretty good. VisiBone has been around for a long time. So here we go. So these are a whole bunch of hex codes. Now this particular set of hex codes is generally referred to as the browser safe color set. Really not too important, but there are 16.7 million different colors. 216 of them are considered to be browser safe, but that was more of concern when more people used 256 color monitors, and we wanted to use a limited set, 216, that would look the same on different browsers, different computer systems. So now you can pretty much go wherever you want. So most of these online color charts are really not going to be the most fun for you. So instead of using a hex code color chart, something else you might look at, do a Google search for color scheme. Or color scheme picker is probably even a better one. But here's one right here, color schemer. Okay, so now I can choose a whole bunch of different colors, and of course it provides me the hex code over here on the left, and there's a bunch of different, so this is a software app you can download. But I can click on these, and this is really useful for people like me. I'm not very artistic, but I can click on a color here and I can get some complementary colors. So basically I could just pick from the set, say, okay, these are the colors that I'm going to use for my website, and I can make a note of all these hex codes and start using them wherever I want to. So I might have a color for backgrounds, for font colors, for hyperlink colors, and headlines and accent colors and things like that. So now that I've got my colors taken care of, I'm going to go back to good old-fashioned boring whites and blacks and purples and reds and blues. Alright, so I've got my headline 1, font weight normal, text align center, font family Verdana, color all white. Let me jump back over to my browser and see how this is looking. There it is, my text is centered on the page. Now I did want to show you some borders here with this video, and I haven't even done that yet. So let me go ahead and put in border bottom 2 pix solid £, oh there it is, FF00, which is the hex code for bright yellow. And let me go ahead and close this off. There we go. I need my closing curly braces. Save this, browser, refresh. There we go. Now I used a shorthand property. There's several border related shorthand properties. Border bottom is one of them. And notice that all my previous properties, they simply had 1 value each, but this border bottom property has 3 values. I've got border width, border style, and border color. And I could have used all those individually, but I chose to use a shorthand property, which allows me to group those values together. So they do need to be in this order: the width, the style, and the color. And there's several different styles you can choose from. So obviously there's solid, there's also dotted, there's a dotted border. What else have we got? I think we can do dashed, dashed border, double borders. That one's really hard to see there, so let me try this. Let me change this over to, will this help? 10 pixels, there we go. So there we can see a double border on there. Groove. Can you kind of see it's supposed to be kind of a 3D kind of looking border there. Groove. Outset. You might use the outset and inset borders. They look a little bit better when you're doing borders on all 4 sides and you want to create a 3-dimensional button effect. But there's outset and there's also inset. Okay. It really loses a lot when you can only see the bottom portion there. So, a bunch of different border styles. Now, since I only specified a border bottom, that's all we're seeing. Now, if I just wanted to do the border property, I'm going to have a border on all 4 sides. Save this, I'll tab F5 to refresh, and now I've got a 4-sided border. And by the way, you can actually see where that inset is a little bit more obvious now. the left and the top are shaded, whereas the bottom and the right are bright. So those are some different uses of borders. I'll go back to border bottom, and I'll make this 2 pixels, solid, and it's back to yellow. There we go. Now if I want to control the space in between my text and my border, that's done with padding. Okay? So padding is between the text and the border, margin is outside of the border. Okay? So if I want a little bit more space in between my text and my border, I'm going to try this. I'm going to put a little bit of padding on the bottom, and I'll start off with a big number, 10 pixels, and watch as I refresh. There we go. So now I've got more space in between the text and the border. I'll go ahead and scale that back to 5, and now it's a little bit closer. So that's a little bit with borders. Okay? A little margin or a little padding in there. And one more border property I want to check out. Let me jump back over to my HTML here, and let's see. I'll put this back to border on all 4 sides, and I'm also going to put in border radius, and let's try 10 pixels, and let's also put a little margin on here. How about a margin of 5 pixels? So margin is outside the border, so that'll give some space outside of my border within my red paint background. So let me go ahead and save this, back over to the browser, refresh, and now I've got a slight curved border. So another way of using some borders for visual elements.